Mimosas, because I'm shining.
Woo! That was good, guys.
Okay, why did you guys decide to have more than one child?
I wanted to have like multiple children. I wanted them to be able to learn different qualities that you learn when you have siblings versus when you're the only child. So the whole sharing, later on down the road, you have someone that you can go to. I don't know. I just felt like it was necessary to at least have more than one.
And do you feel like that way because of your childhood and how you pretty much like you grew up with your sister, but you guys didn't live in the same house, so you felt like the only child? Is that why? Do you feel?
Absolutely. And I feel like some of those, and I hate to label anybody who's an only child, but it's true. You kind of take on those like almost quote unquote spoiled tendencies because you're so used to being by yourself and not sharing, and you kind of have to figure everything out by yourself. So you don't really have anyone to like look to like that has maybe experienced something that you haven't. Usually if you have an older sibling, like they'll tell you like, no, don't do this. I already did this. Or you will see the things that they did so you wouldn't do it. When you're only child, you kind of have to fend for yourself in a sense. And it can be boring. It can be challenging. You look to your friends more for them to guide you. And sometimes not all your friends are good, especially growing up. So I just felt like it was necessary to give them that, you know,
Foundation.
opportunity to have more people they can look up to or more responsibility in a sense of being like an older sibling or younger. So that's why I decided to have multiple.
For me, I grew up with a lot of cousins, and I've said this before. Like, I had a ton of cousins, and we're all super close in age. And so we basically grew up as siblings because we were always at each other's houses, sleepovers, we would walk to school together, whatever. And I loved that. Like, I loved having someone always there with me to help me, to guide me, to share, like, create memories with. And I think, like, before I even had kids, I just had that mentality that I'm going to have more than one child because I loved having all of them around me when I was little and growing up. So I just knew. But now that I have kids, I'm like, I don't want that many.
That's so funny that you said that because I wanted four. Like
Me too.
at one point when I think we were in high school or something foolish, but we had said we wanted four. And then after we had the first, we're like, hold on, that's a lot. Like maybe we'll just have two. And so it took a lot to have that other one, and that's why they're so spaced out, but we'll talk about that later on. But I grew up in a family of five, like there was five of us kids, and um it was very dysfunctional. It was very loud, but we were all so close in a very strange way, and we grew up very, very close together. Now everyone's kind of spreading out and stuff, but when we were young, oh my gosh. And I think because um we also grew up with a dad who was like kind of very strict, and we all kind of had to like protect each other, from my dad and his dysfunction too. So it made us even thicker, like
Closer.
more bonded, and like I said, it wasn't like a wholesome bond. It was very dysfunctional, but we had each other's back for everything, and we were super, super solid. And then we also fought, but I wanted that a big loving family. Like I loved having a lot of siblings and never being by myself. I mean,
Yeah.
there were times where it would get old, but I like to have like the company, um and I agree with Roni when she said like when you have a lot of siblings, you learn to deal with different personalities, and you learn to forgive faster, you know, because not all of you guys are always going to get along. You're not going to like everybody's personality, but you learn to coexist. And I feel like that's a very important in the world that we live in, because
Absolutely.
we have to coexist with people. It not, you know, the world isn't just revolve around us, you know? And so I definitely knew I didn't want an only child, and that wasn't, I had some examples of only children that I would see around me, and I was like, for the most part, I just saw how like kind of lonely they were, you know? So I was like, oh, I don't want my child to be alone. Like, I want them to have friends, you know, like their companions and their siblings. And then now that I'm getting older, what I see from some only children is that they feel they do have that whole world, the world revolves around me, only my opinion matters, very self-centered, you know, and it's kind of like, and not as forgiving. And I'm kind and I'm like, you are the only child. But then there's some that they're very warm and loving to everybody, and they are fine with a lot of people around them, and they don't have that. So I guess you're just going to meet some who have it and some who don't. But I definitely didn't want my son to be the only child, because I didn't want him to feel like alone. And then also I didn't want him to feel like everybody was just going to bow to him because it was all about him, you know?
Yeah.
So,
And that goes into our next question, which is, were you afraid of the only child syndrome? Which Janelle kind of touched on that. So if you want to keep going on, it sounds like you were very afraid of that. So tell us how afraid you actually were.
I was afraid. And then I noticed, like, because some of my, I knew some people who had kids young. So their kid was the only child for a very long time, probably like the first 10 years of life. And I saw that, you know, they didn't have that companionship, but they also, they were very spoiled, because everyone spoils, you know, the only child. And well, not everyone, some situations are different, you know, every family is different, but in this situation they were very spoiled. And you knew, like, if it was just all hell broke loose if this person didn't get their way, you know? So because I guess it just depends on who you see. Like, if you are around somebody who's the only child and they're so kind, then you're not going to have that negative taste in your mouth about only children. But if you have somebody who's like a little spoiled shit, and then you're like, oh God, I don't want my kid to be like that, you know? So it just depends, you know? And I just didn't want my kids to feel like the world revolved around them, because I feel like when they get older, it's a hard reality that the world doesn't revolve around you. And I feel like that causes a lot of trauma in their life, when they're like, wait a minute, they're not going to do what I say. Like, my parents do what I say, you know, my family does what I say. How come you're not going to fall in line, you know? And then they have like a hard time accepting that reality, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's,
I don't know if I would say I was afraid of it, but I was more leaning towards like, I just want more than one kid. I don't think I like really know any, like growing up, I don't think I really knew anyone who was a single child. I mean, I was only exposed to like our huge family. I had friends from school, but they all had siblings, so I didn't really have like a bad taste about like the only child type thing, but I knew I didn't want just one. But then like I always was like, oh, but I don't want just two because it's just two. And then I didn't want just three because I don't want a middle child. And so I always was like, I'm gonna have four, because then, oh yeah, like the third one, if you have a third child, like if you go on roller coasters, one's gonna be left out. And I had like this weird theory about like how many kids I was gonna have. But now that I have kids, it's like thinking about it, like as you get older, it's nice to have someone that can relate to you. Like for example, it's just me and my brother now, but I can only imagine like going through like my mom's death and going to the funeral home and not, and like imagine like if I was the only child having to deal with all that, like it's
Yeah.
nice that like we were able to go together and do
Together.
it. You know what I mean? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
so for me, like as an adult with children now, I'm like, oh, it's just nice to have more than one because you have someone who's with you through
With
life.
you.
Like it's like a partner, but it's not like your spouse. You know what I mean?
And these are just
Yeah.
our personal thoughts, guys. Like we're definitely going to have a guest on the show who has like one child and doesn't want any more, or they are the only child and they can give you their perspective, because we are totally open-minded to all of, perspectives. And we definitely want you guys to hear the different perspectives too. This is just from our experiences, what we've, dealt with, or the choices that we've made, just to clear that up, because I don't want everyone thinking like, yeah, it's easy for you to say because you guys have tons of kids, or maybe we have to be sensitive to the people who can't
Who
have
can't
more
have
than
more than
one,
one.
so we're definitely going to have people on here to touch on those topics. This is just why we
Are
decided to have more than
personal.
one.
Absolutely. For me, my whole thing is like I kind of looking at it in the long term way, like as having multiple kids, and as kids get older, I want them to have like, aunts and uncles and things like that. So the more kids you have, the more opportunity you have for them to have that. Like in my case, like my kids don't, like they have an uncle through their dad, but like, not through me. So I feel like it takes a village. So the fact that you can have multiple kids and you have an opportunity for your kids to have more aunts and uncles and stuff like that, I feel like it makes it easier. Well, it may make it harder when you have a bigger family. I don't know, because all the arguing and the bickering, but in a good, in a perfect world that we do not live in, that would be great. But
it
that was my reasoning.
it definitely has its challenges because everybody has
Absolutely.
different personalities, but I think when push comes to shove, it's nice because, like Marianne said, at the end of the day, if there is some type of traumatic accident or something in your family or death, everyone does seem to rally together no matter what
Mm-hmm.
animosity there is, and that's always nice to know that. And I just want to add in there is that, like, my first son, he was the only child for 4 years. So I got to see him being the only child and have that kind of
A
personality that
spoiled
I was
life.
telling you guys that I didn't want him to have. And I tried so hard to keep him from having that self-centered spoiledness, and it didn't help that he was also the only grandchild for the longest time too. So he got tons of presents, and he just had that, like, everything revolves around me. And now that we've had kids, I feel like he's kind of broken out of
Yeah.
that. But it's funny because he still has it sometimes, and I'm like, and he'll be like, what is, auntie and uncle and all these people are going to buy me for Christmas? And I'm like, they have their own kids. Like, they're not buying, like, but they used to buy me stuff. And I'm like, those days
That
are
was
gone,
when you
my friend. Like, you're not the only child, like, and so he remembers those days where he used to be spoiled by everybody. And he kind of still, I don't know if he just still expects it or what, but I'm like, dude, you got hard reality is that you're not the only one anymore. There's 10 other, there's a total of
grandchildren.
10 grandkids now. So he went from being the only one for a long time to now
Mm.
sharing it with 9 other kids. So
That's something to think about. I didn't realize that because technically Devin was the only child for 6 years
yeah,
too. So
but he's
wow.
very different. Like, I feel like, I mean, I don't know, you're his mom, so you know him better, but from what I see, he doesn't seem to have that selfish gene in him. He's very nurturing to his
He
siblings. So
is.
I don't know if it's because he was 6 years old, so he was a little bit more mature when you did have
Mm.
the other babies. And my son
It
was still
wasn't
in like
mature.
a, no.
He cried at the hospital and he said they were tears of joy, but they were not. They were tears of why did she do this? Like
But
it
the fact that he knew what tears of joy meant at
Yeah,
6 years old,
he was like, mature enough to
he was
know.
mature.
I guess that's
Yeah.
a good point, right?
That trickery inside of him. Yeah.
Tell me
So
about it.
after you guys had your second child, do you feel like life got easier or harder with two kids?
Um, I think for me, because it was 6 years apart, it was a little mix of both because I feel like I had to, in a sense, start all over because even though 6 years technically doesn't seem like a long time, things had changed so much within that 6 years. Like from the bouncers to the food makers, like to everything just changed. So I felt like it was a little challenging, but then I had already been there, especially since I had a boy. Um, I was able to like pick it up quickly and get my shit together real fast. Um, so I feel like it played its parts. Like it was a mixture of both. I don't think parenting ever gets easier at all because we go through so many different stages and the kids go through different stages where they're still growing and things are getting challenging and the world is changing. So I don't feel like our job is ever easy. Like it when people say does it get easier, it never gets easier. I feel like if anything, it gets more challenging the older that they get.
And
Yeah.
if you're mean easier because you get more sleep, yes, you will get more sleep at one point, but then you're going to lose it again when they start going out in high school or, things like that where they're sleeping over a friend's house and then you're worried sick about them all night long.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not going to lie, the transition period between having a second, like a newborn, and then my son, he was 4 when my newborn was born. Newborn was born. That kind of sounds funny. But um it was hard. My son, even though he prayed for this baby, he wanted a brother so bad. But when my baby came, it's like he regressed or something. Like he definitely was jealous. He like wanted to be the baby, and it took him a couple of weeks to like realize, okay, this kid is not going anywhere. But it was like, it's hard because yeah, you have that extra child to take care of and you're tired and just the whole challenges that come with a newborn. But it really helps if your first child is potty trained, because it's one less thing you have to worry about. You do have to worry about running them to the toilet, but it's less costly because you don't have to deal with the diapers
Double
and all of
diapering.
and all of that stuff.
Well, I have 2 kids and they're both super young right now, and I'm like going insane. So I would say it's harder, but I don't have anything else to compare it to other than like when he was, a single child. But it's not, I mean, at the beginning, I want to say I feel like it was easy, but then it was hard because like everyone was learning to adjust. Like not only was Landon learning that there was a sibling there that he had to share his parents with, but Adam and I were learning how to split our time evenly with the kids or be able to pay more attention to Landon. Like, like I was solely focused on the newborn because I was breastfeeding, I was tired, all my, hormones, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nice that Adam like stepped up and like, had to spend more time with Landon and, picked up more responsibilities. But I feel like it was hard because just there was a huge change for everyone. And like you guys said, like it's not that it ever gets easier, it just gets more challenging as they're getting older. But it's nice. Yeah, it's nice when they start playing. But I feel like now that they're playing together, they're fighting more.
Yeah.
So I'm at that stage right now and I'm like going crazy.
I
So
think
Yeah.
that's
I am
always
like,
the stage.
this is my episode. Like, I am the one who's teeter-tottering between, like, do we want another child? Or are we okay with 2? If you ask my husband on certain days, he's, absolutely done and is okay with the 2. But if you ask him on a good day, he's like, oh, maybe we'll have a third. And I don't know. I
On a
don't
good day that the kids are
know.
getting along and
Yeah.
playing, on
Yeah.
that exact moment and hour, he's like, yeah, it's gonna happen. That's how we felt too. Well, so I feel like it does. Okay, I know obviously there's always parent concerns and stuff, but I think there is a time that it gets a little bit easier. Like once they start playing together, it started getting a little bit easier. But then you're right, you have to referee them because then they start fighting more often. But the playing makes it all feel worth
Worth
it.
it.
Like seeing those moments walking by their room and they're playing without you making them, without you forcing them, you're like, oh my God, you really are, like, you're bonding. This is exactly what I wanted and envisioned. And it's far and few, but that's what
Yeah.
makes it worth it, you
Like
know?
what makes it easier for us is that like they're slowly like now becoming more independent. So like I don't need to help Lennon in the bathroom, or I'm not constantly having to watch Levi. Like they can go in the room by themselves. And as long as I can hear them, like I'm
Yes.
assuming they're okay. But
And
once it's
everybody's
quiet,
breathing.
yeah. But I feel like that, I mean, that's what I would say is when it gets easier, when they can start fending for themselves. But then that's when things get more challenging, is because you're now doing a different stage in their life that's like, oh, I gotta learn how to be a referee now, or I don't know, they gotta learn how to
And
share.
I think that that's where people are coming from when they're asking if it ever gets easier, because they don't have a second kid yet, or they don't have that third kid yet, and they're wondering like, should I make that transition? Is it just going to constantly be forever hard? But it won't. Like once you get past that newborn stage and that first year hump that you went through when you had one, it's gonna, like she said, the more independent the baby gets and the child gets, it will get easier
In
in
some
that
areas.
aspect.
Yeah.
And
But you're always going to worry about them because there's going to be something else like bullying at school, or you know, something else that's going to make
and
you worry
I
in
feel
a
like
different
it
way.
depends on the person, because I hear people like they have excellent newborns. Like they're like, oh, this baby doesn't cry. They're so easy. So it's not even a question on if they're going into a second child, because that child was so easy. And then the second child may come and be like, oh my God, this child is totally different. So I feel like it kind of depends, you know, per person and per child, because some people, they have it easy. Some people go just with their pregnancy too. Some people can go through their
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy super easy, not throw up one time, and they're like, oh, that was a blast for me. I'm doing it again. So it just depends, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
each
hear.
child is different. So like
Oh,
you're not only
absolutely.
learning the new dynamics of the family, you have to learn a whole new child. And
New child with a whole new
someone that
personality.
you had an easy ass firstborn, but now you have a super challenging second child, and it's like, oh
Or
my god.
sassy ass three-nager.
Third child, yeah.
Little Miss Sass.
So, well, how did you guys choose your kids' age gaps? Was this something that was on purpose, or was it accidental, or what?
So for me, as I mentioned before, I would have loved, now looking back, to space them out like accordingly. But as I mentioned, I had two miscarriages, which kind of altered our age gaps, because my kids
Mhm.
are so far apart, but not because I chose to have them that far apart. It's just the way things went, um, with the miscarriages, like put them so far apart. But if I if I could have had it my way, I would have liked them to be like no more than like 3 years apart. For me, I feel like that would have been a good age. Um, but it didn't work out that way, so I didn't get to choose.
I think as soon as Landon hit 3 is when I started having the baby fever, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's a good time because he's potty trained and you don't have to worry about double diapers." And um I like would refer back to like, so me, my brother, and my sister are all 5 years apart, but we never really had anything in common. Like it's not till we got, well, not my sister passed away, but not till like my brother and I got older that we started bonding like closer. So I was like, oh, I don't want them too far apart though. You know what I mean? So I think I was having the baby fever at 3 years, and then like he was potty trained, and I always had told myself I want to make sure that each child has like enough one-on-one time, because like people would tell me like have them back to back, like as soon as I had Lennon, they're like try for your next one, so they'll be super close and you'll get over the whole diaper stage all at once. And I don't know. I was just like, but I feel like it's not fair for the first kid when you like don't give them that much attention, or they didn't get all their one-on-one with you. And then the second kid, I don't know, I just knew like at 3 years I was like, okay, we're ready. And I just told my husband, are you ready? I'm ready.
So it's interesting that you say that whole spacing out thing. Is that my mom had the first three kids that she had were all 4 or 5 years apart, and then the last two were only a year apart. So I would always listen to her stories, and she would constantly tell us how difficult it was to have them so close together, because they're both babies, basically, and how much easier it was to have them spaced apart because we were able to help her,
Yeah.
and we were more independent, and she didn't have to worry about us as much. And we all kind of got along well, and we were able to kind of, the older ones were able to set the example, and then the younger ones kind of wanted to follow in the older footsteps. And because of the age difference, it was always doing, better, not being a baby, right? As it would be if like a 2-year-old's, following a 3-year-old, or a 1-year-old's following a 2-year-old, because it's so close together. And they're still in those like toddler years. And so she had the both worlds. And so she would always tell us like, I just wish that all of you guys were spaced out, because I feel like the reason why there's she felt like the last two didn't get as much attention, and she regretted that. She was like, I wish that they would have gotten their one-on-one attention, because, well, I had a newborn, at least the older one was still getting the attention. And that's not how it was with the younger two. And so hearing that when I was growing up, I was like, okay, I'm going to space mine out. But I thought 2 years, like I had wanted them like every 2 years, so that they would still be in school together for longer. But it just didn't work out that way. So we accidentally had them every 4 years, and each one of them were like 4.5 years apart. And I think it was just because at some point, like somewhere between around the third year, I finally like forgot how it was to give, birth, and the labor pains and the horrible pregnancies that I had. And it made it like, okay, I think it was okay. I could do
I
it
survived
again,
the first
I
two.
think that must be the common age then, around 3, because you know how people will ask mothers like right after they have a baby, like, do you want more? And they're like, do not ask me that right now when I almost passed out on the damn delivering table. Ask me that in a couple years. So I feel like 3 is that happy medium where you're like, okay, I got this swing of things, having a little baby fever. Let's try
and
again.
a lot of the times the 3-year-old's potty trained by then, and probably nailing it because they're already 3. So you're like, okay, we got this down. Like I could add another person to the mix. So what would you say the pros and cons are of your age gap? Like, would you do it differently next time? I mean, next time,
we getting another life,
like if you had a friend who was planning their babies, would you say, oh yeah, follow this way, like every 6 years is good? Or would you tell her like, hey, I think this way is?
I actually wouldn't tell them. I would tell them to do whatever they think will work for them, because what will work for me would probably not work for them. And if anybody knows me and knows my husband, this fool wants a shitload of kids. Like in a perfect world, his number, if you really legit ask him like, how many kids do you want? And if I was like willing to just go and do it, it would be like 10. I think 10 is his ultimate like number. Like he says 8, but he has said 10 also. So I feel like he's crazy. So it just depends on the person. But for me, the gap, it's weird because I have a 10-year gap in my oldest and my youngest. And I feel like that is extremely way too long of a gap. You have a teenager who definitely has absolutely nothing in common with the 3-year-old. However, the 10-year apart help because he's able to babysit, he's able to help discipline, he's able to help structure and guide them and show them like, okay, you don't do this, you do this. So it helps in that way. but it's absolutely nothing in common. So it's kind of like a little sketchy, but it does help. And then my middle and the baby are 4 years apart, and they play together very well. They get along for the most part. They have their sibling fights every now and then, but it's not horrible. So, yeah, that's how the age gaps work for me. They're a little everywhere, but what can I do about it and make it work?
So for me, the pros, my two are 4 years apart. And the pros, Levi, the younger one, feeds off of the older one. So it's not like he was able to ride his strider at like 14 months. And it's funny when people see him on his little bike, everyone's so amazed. And I'm like, well, he's watching like his older one and just wants to keep up with him. So it's nice like that he is learning faster because he has someone to set the example kind of thing. And but the con of that is sometimes when the older one sees the younger one getting a lot of attention, he starts like I've seen him have moments where he reverts back to acting like a baby just to get the attention. And I'm like, what the hell? You know, like, are you seriously like babbling or like whining? And it'll be exactly like what the baby does. And I'm like, why? And that's when he starts acting up. And my husband and I are like, oh, it's because he needs more attention. But like, you know, that's like one of the cons of them being that far apart. And like what sucks is like Landon is so rough with the little one. Like, but now that Levi's like almost 2, like they're starting to play together. So that's nice. I mean, there's a lot of pros and cons. And then like as I think about it in the future, like they won't be in high school together. And that's where they need to find their own identity. So it's nice that they won't be there together, like, you know, because I feel like if they were, Levi would be like whatever doing whatever. Yeah. So because my brother and I didn't go to high school together, so and it, you know, we're two completely different people. But I feel like the people that I see that have kids that are like a year apart, they're like BFFs and they have the same group of friends. I mean, it's not bad, but like it doesn't help them be their own person, if that makes sense to me, at least. And then lately, now that Levi's becoming more independent and mobile, because he feeds off Landon, like he's more fearless. So it freaks me and my husband out because Landon was never like really too fearless when he was that age. Like Levi just jumps off things and like he could easily break something, or I don't like he's doing things like he's like a daredevil, and I'm like, oh my god, this kid's gonna end up in the hospital trying to keep up with his brother. So it's like freaks me out more. But I think it's nice that they're at different ages. I like the age gap, but if you ask my husband, he's like, oh, I wish they were closer in age. But that's my husband, so you're asking me.
Yes.
That's so funny that you I didn't know that you guys didn't go to the same high school at the same time, you and your brother.
Because we both like I had my 8th grade promotion when he was having his graduation from high school.
Oh wow.
So we had like a combined party.
That's how Harley and Peyton will be, I think. They are.
And our kids will be the same too. None of them will go to high school together. And I was actually bummed because I remember growing up and I adored my brother, you know, so I wanted to go to high school with him. And I remember thinking like, okay, I want my kids to be able to go to high school together, to have like that. I don't know,
somebody
if it was like a safety net, but then I also grew up in not a like kind of a rough area, so to me it was kind of like a safety net, you know. But maybe it's not like that in other parts of areas. But I feel like if I could do it again, I would do it this way, because even though they are spaced out, and ours is 10 and my daughter's 3. No, I'm sorry. Ours, my oldest and my youngest are 10 years apart too. But opposite from Roni, there right now, with her being so little and cute, he's really, really like good with her. Like he surprised me because my husband feared the same thing. He was like, oh, they're not gonna have anything in common. You know, that's a big age gap. Like he was kind of like against trying to have a third anyway. And he was kind of telling me like, that's gonna be a huge age difference. But now seeing them, like when the kids play hide and seek on the block, like he has her and he makes sure that, you know, and it doesn't seem like a burden, because when I was younger, we all had to watch each other and it was like, oh, come on, you know, like, come on, little brother or sister, like you got to follow me around, you know. But with them, like he's so good with her. And I don't know if it's just right now because of this, because she is so little, and eventually maybe she'll be annoying to him, but I hope not, because they are so cute together. And then the middle one, he adores his older brother, and it's kind of, I could see how it could be a negative thing, is because when he was little, he had this like daring personality and my older one did not. So when my middle one got to a certain age and realized, hey, I want to be like my older brother, and he's kind of shy, so I'm going to be shy, and he kind of, you know, is too cool for school. You know, my son was going through
he's
like a too
acting
cool
like
for
that.
school age, and so my little one, who was more outgoing, naturally became more too cool for school, you know, and he didn't want to act like his age. And I feel like it could have that negative effect where he wants to grow up too fast. And I could definitely see that in high school, him wanting to hang out with his older brother who's going to be in college and he's going to be barely starting high school, you know, and him wanting to like grow up and just be too old for his, you know, his
More mature.
age. So I think that would definitely be a con. And then I also am noticing he's only 7, but I feel like he loses interest with kids his age. I don't know what it is. Like he's super silly at our house and he's super like hyper and stuff, and he acts his age at our house. But then once other kids come that are his age, he acts like my older son, like, you know, more calm and more mature. And I'm like, get off your high horse. Like be a kid, you know? Excuse me. Oh my God, I'm burping. But he's like, I don't know. I just feel like sometimes he tries to act too cool. And I think that's because he's following in his brother's footsteps. And not that my older son tries to act cool, but they just have different personalities. My older son's super quiet and laid back. And so he already has that kind of chill personality. And my middle son, he's super hyper and outgoing and talkative. And I feel like I wish he would give into that more and not try to be someone he's not. And what I noticed about kids who are like closer in age is that because they don't have that huge age gap, they're not really like idolizing their older sibling, because to them they're like, you're my age, you know, like you're just a baby like me. And so they just kind of like do their own thing and they kind of find their own identity. And I think that that's definitely a pro for having your kids pretty close together. But I want to add that they're not perfect. They are getting to an age that they're more independent and more self-sufficient. So that's really awesome. But it was tough the younger years to try to get them to that self-sufficient stage, you know. And now that my youngest one is turning into, like, she's 3 and she's able to kind of hang with the boys now, they are playing nicely together more often. So that's nice. I feel like we're finally reaping the benefits of all 3 of them playing together, which makes it really nice. But there's times where none of them play together and then I kind of feel bad for my younger one, because I'm like, she's all by herself and she's the only girl, you know. But I think it's good too to have them have their like independent time and alone time, so they can kind of learn what they like and not what the older siblings are wanting to do.
Absolutely.
So because they are so far spaced, like 4 years or whatever, I feel like there's so many mistakes that I made with my first one that I was able to correct by the time I had my second one, because you kind of see.
What do you consider a mistake?
Okay, so for example, I was so afraid to discipline my first son because I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna emotionally damage him, and he's gonna cry so bad, and he's never gonna forgive me if I, you know, put him on timeout or whatever. Like, I remember fearing that I was like you know, because there's so many different parenting styles out there, and some people don't want to discipline their kids. And I was spanked with a belt, so we just came from like night and day, you know? And so I just didn't know what to do. I didn't want my kid to be like emotionally affected. But I noticed that like it's so funny because we did discipline him, and he doesn't even remember. Like by the time he was 3 and we could actually talk to him and ask him like, hey, do you remember getting, you know, smacked on the butt or whatever? He would be like, no. And by that age, we didn't have to smack him on the butt anymore because, and really it was far and few. And we talked about this in our discipline episode, which we'll link, but, he knew like, okay, by that time he knew like when mom and dad get mad, like, okay, we're going to do it, you know? And it's funny because then I learned, oh gosh, so it did like, I didn't need to be so fearful of putting that, like giving them consequences and teaching them this because it wasn't too hard or too forceful, and they get it, you know, at a certain age. So there was a lot of things that I thought I was affecting them in a negative way. And then by the time my first child turned 4 and he was able to talk back to me and we would have these conversations, I realized like, oh, it didn't affect him, or okay, next time I'm going to try this differently. And, you know, and I could kind of do like correct my mistakes, you know? And I feel like when you have them so close together, you're kind of repeating everything because you don't have that far enough space to talk to your kid and ask them at that age, like, hey, did this affect you in some sort of way? Or like, you know, because they're so close, they're still a baby, you know? So you kind of just keep those bad, if you did have mistakes, you keep those bad habits going and you're repeating it because you don't have that long enough space to learn from your lessons. You know what do you get what I'm saying?
Sure, we do.
Yes.
Oh, shut up.
I'm just thinking like the parents that have the kids that are close enough, like, do they have those mistakes?
Yeah, we don't, technically we don't know.
Well, you know, and like you could only base your opinions off of what's around you, you know, and everybody has different people around them, different parenting styles around them. So I just base it off of what I see around me or what I have seen, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, some people have it. Like some people have that whole having one child down pat, and some people have that whole spacing them very closely together down pat, where it actually, they have a lot of benefits from that. And they think it's like a pro, you know, like they enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I just don't have that patience to have 3 babies all back to back. Yeah. Some people do.
Well, our guest that we had on before, Sandy, for example, she had twins and then had another baby a year right after that. So now she calls them triplets because she has 3 little ones that are under 3. And I'm like, twins alone is scary.
I know.
So, so I guess it just depends on the warrior, right?
You have to be a warrior. Yeah. You just never know. And God bless her. I feel like if you know, and it's funny because you're not supposed to compare yourself to people, but sometimes I'm like, I wish I had that patience, because there's times that I still get impatient with my kids, and I'm like, and then you see the moms who are so calm and they have 5 kids and they're all back to back, and you're just like, how come you got so much extra patience than
like,
me?
Teach me. Are you, where do I sign up for this class?
Yes. Like,
what did you do?
What I want to know is like, how did your parents raise you to have all those patience? You know, like I just feel like we learned kind of from our parents. So
I almost feel like I have less and less patience the more kids I have. Like everyone would tell me like, you're so patient with Landon. And now that I have 2, I'm like snappy more like quickly than I was before. And I'm like, oh my God, imagine if I have a 3rd, I'm going to lose my shit.
No, I think you'll get paid. A lot of people tell me I have a lot of patience too. And
you do. I feel like
you
both do.
I've heard that all my life. I feel like I have a good balance, but I feel like it gets easier a little bit. It's a mixture. It's a mixture for me. Yeah.
But I feel like there's a certain age that a child hits where they're like, I'm going to test every button that you have. Like, I'm going to push every button that you have just to see how you're going to react. And sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 6, 7, 17, you know, like like it's all at different ages. And so I feel like it's common, Marianne, for you to feel like, okay, you're getting to an age where you're pushing buttons and I am super snappy, you know? And so because my oldest son, he's 11 right now. And I thought we were past the pushing buttons phase, but now he's trying to like manipulate or like kind of get things under your nose, you know, like, oh, well, you did say this. And I'm like, I never said that. Like, so and I feel like I'm snappy on this kid because he's trying to like pull the wool over my eyes. And I'm like, you're too
Manipulate
young.
the situation.
Yeah. And I expected that like high school, not this age. So it just depends.
And then that depends on how clever the kid is. If the kids figure it out early, then you can't fault them for not figuring it out when they were a teenager and figuring it out sooner.
Yeah. And then there's times where I catch him and I'm like, if his dad's home, I'm like, tell him what you told me. And no, but tell him exactly how you told me. And the same tone and everything. I want you to show him how you speak to me. And then he's like, what? And I'm like, no, you don't let me go that easy. Like there's times where he'll ask his dad for something. And if his dad says no, that's it. He'll just drop it. And with me, it's like, but why? I want to know why. And I'm like, why can't your dad tell you why? Like, why don't you do the same bullcrap to him?
Same over here. How did you guys know you were ready for another baby? Or do you know, or did you know?
After Landon, or like I said, I was starting to have baby fever and he was asking for another sibling and people were asking, like, I feel like people always ask you, like, especially like right when you have the kid, but then again, like every year they ask you and I'm like, okay, so then it starts going in your mind and you start analyzing, okay, should I not? But yeah, I was getting the baby fever. Landon was asking for a sibling and we were just in a place where, like, I mean, financially we were stable, but like I would talk about it with my husband and he wasn't opposed to it. So it's like, oh, maybe we should try then. So, but now I'm like, oh, Levi's still only 2 and I feel like I missed his whole first year. And I don't know about like a third. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if we're ready for a third or if we even want a third.
Do you feel like people like asking you in alters your like opinion or what you want? Because I feel like people are always like asking a question and it gets in our head mentally because when you're single, they're like, oh, do you have a boyfriend? Then you start dating, like, are you going to get married? Then you get married. Are there children? Then you have one. Are you having more? Like, it's always that
never enough
question. No, it's never enough. And you're the person dealing with it. So it's like, let me do this at my own
I think
time.
For our family, it's the question is, are you guys gonna have a girl? Like, are you guys gonna try for a girl? You know what I mean?
Just wave my magic wand.
Opposed to like after Landon was born, everyone was just saying, are you gonna have another baby? Like it wasn't like a specific question. But now it's like, are you guys gonna try for a girl? And when is that? And da da da. And I'm like, right now I'm just going crazy and it's not crossing my mind. But now that you're asking me, now I'm asking my husband, and we're just like. But yeah, I mean, after Landon was 3, yeah, we were ready. But now, like, Levi's only 2. Landon's gonna be 6 in February. I don't know. I just tell everyone, ask me in a couple years.
Yeah, you haven't reached that 3 mark yet.
Yeah. But if you ask my husband, he's like, no, we don't know. We're done.
But that's on a certain day that you ask him, right?
Yeah. Like right now, the boys are constantly fighting because they're playing more together. Like they're wrestling a lot. And I'm going to blame Janelle's kids. because
That's pretty young to wrestle.
Landon watched
Already?
Jack and Max wrestle the other
Oh my
weekend
God.
and was like, why are they fighting? And I'm like, oh, they're just playing because they're brothers. So now him and Levi, like Levi's naturally just always like jumping on Landon and whatever, like doing his own roughness. But now Landon's letting him and like kind of fighting back with him. And I'm like today, like they were, I don't know what the hell they were doing, but they were in the room and I could hear Levi whining. So I go in there to check what's going on. And they're laughing as soon as I get there. And I'm like, what? Why was he just crying? He's like, oh, because he just fell on his own. And then all of a sudden, Landon's like on his belly, and Levi climbs on top of Landon and starts pulling his hair and stuff. And I'm like trying to get mad at Levi. And I'm like, Levi. And Landon's like, it's okay, Mom, it's fine. And I'm like, oh, what?
What is going on in here?
So I don't know. Somebody's going to end up in the hospital. And I'm just going crazy trying to make sure nobody does because, you know, I don't want to be around COVID.
So now is the wrong time to ask if you want more, obvious.
Yeah, so if you ask me and my husband now, we're like, hell no.
H to the N-O.
And like, you know, right now, everyone who's having kids, like their spouse can't even go into their appointments with them. And
Yeah.
it's like, I'm like, no, it's not a good time.
COVID children.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds awful. We should have an interview. We should interview somebody who's given birth during COVID so we can hear about the experience, because I feel like
pregnancy and
it's
all
so different,
Yeah,
you know,
we should, for
The
sure.
global
having
pandemic.
to have a drive-by baby shower and not allowing your husband. Some of them their husbands couldn't go in the delivery room, right?
I
At
know
some
a
point,
few. Yeah,
when
I
it was
know.
super high risk.
Mm-hmm. I know
So
someone who gave birth and their husband
Like
couldn't
my
come in.
cousin's pregnant, and like all her doctor's appointments, her husband has to FaceTime while they're in the appointment so he can like ask questions and hear what the doctor's saying. And I'm like, that's sad because, like, you know, the first time you see the ultrasound, like the first time you see the baby on the ultrasound, like it's like an emotional time, and he's not there with you.
that's her first kid too.
Yeah, and it's their first kid.
Oh yeah, that sucks. I was
Yeah.
gonna say I went all by myself, but that was my second kid. I feel like your first and your second is completely different. Like the
Yeah.
first they want to be there, and then the second it's like, well, you got it.
Totally different.
It's not that
Tell
big of
me
a
everything's
deal.
wrong. So for me, how did we know we were ready for another baby? It was when we knew okay, so when everybody asked, when anybody would ask us if we wanted another baby, our immediate response was no. But then when that started changing, where it was like you started thinking about it, then you're like, okay, maybe in a couple of years then. And, you know, and so that's when I knew like, hey, am I open to that possibility? And then I would like imagine my life with like another boy, because I knew it was going to be 3 boys. So I like, and once I became okay with the idea of picturing another third boy tailing around my 2 boys and, you know, figuring that whole thing out, and it took 4 years, that's when I realized like, okay, I'm ready to have another baby. But you have to kind of weigh out all the pros and cons. Like, okay, my husband works a lot and it's just going to be us 3 and I'm not going to be able to go anywhere for a while, you know, because I have a newborn and, you know, and all of these things. So you kind of have to, I would say, just weigh out the pros and cons, and also just kind of picture what a baby would be like in your life right now and what you're willing to kind of give up temporarily until that baby becomes like a walker or, you know, a toddler ages. So, but at some point I wanted my son to have a playmate, and then at another, like my third one was all for selfish reasons. I feel like the first 2, it was like I really wanted them to have a playmate, and then the third one I was like, that's all mine. That's my baby. And because I wanted her so bad and I was gonna try everything to get her, I felt like I couldn't complain. I was like, okay, I'm the one who brought this you know, and I told my husband, like, I'll wake up with her all the time. Like, you don't have to do anything. And I mean, thankfully this one he did help, but I was willing to take all the responsibility because I knew I was ready. And I think I was more ready than him. And I really, really wanted the situation. Like I wanted her. So, or another baby.
The
So
situation.
I was gonna say,
wanted
so
the
like if it
pregnancy.
was another boy.
I wanted yeah, no, I was willing because there's no way that I could. That's why it
Know
took
what
me
you were
so
gonna
long,
get.
because there was times where I was like, I'm so good with my two boys. Like, I don't need another one. Like I was fine with the idea of just having my two boys forever, you know, and being a boy mom. But then and then I couldn't imagine adding a third one. Just it wasn't because it was a boy, it was just the amount of work that I was going to have to take on when I already had my hands full. But once they started getting a little bit easier, then I'm like, okay, maybe I could add another baby. And the probability was very high that it was going to be a boy, so I had to make sure that I was going to be okay with now having all three boys, you know. And then I really wanted to try the whole gender swaying, which we got into in a different episode, that we'll link below. But yeah, that's when we went for it. So I feel like when you know, right, Roni? You
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
When you
When you
know,
know,
you
you know.
know.
But I'm a little set up differently because I'm that girl who, like, after the first baby, when people were like, "Are you having another one?" I'm like, "Hell no, I'm not having any more. No." And then the second one, they're like, "Are you having more?" I'm like, "Nope, I'm done. This shop is closed." And then I have a third one. So no one listened to me at all. When I say no, it's always a chance that I could have another one. So I'm
So
like, I've learned to not even say no. Like my answer now, if people ask me, I'm like, I don't know. We'll see. That's my answer now because I feel like I was like, no, no, no. And my mood changed. I feel like I would say no is because I was so scared. My whole thing with having multiple kids is always had the fear of, am I going to be able to divide my love equally to all of them and show each and every one of them the same time and show each and every one of them that I care about them as well as the next? Like I don't have favorites. Like that was my whole thing on making sure I can divide that evenly. And that was the reason why I was always saying no. But as time went on and as I get older, like I enjoy being a parent more and I'm looking to the future now. And I'm like, when I get older and I need someone to take care of me, I want to have a whole bunch of options for
Yeah.
them to come take care of me. I don't want it to be like, you know, like I'm like, okay, if this kid is busy, at least I have this kid. Or well, if this kid's busy, then this kid, you know, like I started looking about like, I don't want to get old and lonely and not have kids come home for the holidays and come with their families and stuff like that. So I started thinking of it in that sense versus like just saying no. So yeah,
so
so
then
that's
maybe
kind
you're
of,
possibly open to having 8 kids.
oh no,
You
I know I'm
never
not comfortable
know.
having eight. No, I already told my husband eight. I'm never going to be open to having eight because I know that I cannot do eight. As much as it sounds fun, eight is, I can't do eight at all.
Okay,
So no.
now if money was no object, would you have 8 kids?
Mm-mm.
No.
No,
Mm.
no,
How many
money.
would you have?
I don't think like because money is great and it makes the world go round, obviously, but it's not everything. So I feel like you can have a ton of money and still not know what the hell you're doing. You can have a ton of money and still be a shitty ass parent. You can have a ton of money, you know. So I don't think it's necessarily the money, but no. That my answer is no. My answer is no
And
at all.
Marianne, what about you? Would
I
you,
mean,
if money was no object and you were just rich and you could have nannies and whatever else, like would you have more babies and would you have them like back to back?
it depends. Like depends. Like my pregnancies have been great with the last two, and I can't complain. And I don't know. Like I didn't know how to answer this, and I had asked my husband, like, "Hey, if money were no object, how many kids would we have?" And he's like, "It's not even has nothing to do with the money. It's more about our sanity."
Yeah.
But
So
money can buy you sanity because you can get more help. That's what so the way that I was thinking about this question and I'm like, okay, if money were no option, I feel like I would have more, but I would do surrogates because my pregnancies were god awful and I cannot imagine, like, and because all three of them were awful, equally awful, and they were three, two different genders, so I now know it doesn't matter whether it's a boy or girl, it's just going to be god awful. So if money was no object, maybe I would hire a surrogate to have my baby and be like Kim Kardashian. Maybe I'd have them back to back like that. They look so cute all like back to back the way she has them, you know?
I know, but do you
But
see her like during COVID and could not have help? She was going crazy.
no, I didn't see. I didn't see. But you're right about the sanity part. She
So,
doesn't have help, but
well, during like when I don't want to be like I don't want to spoil the episode, but like they were airing like when COVID first came and became a big thing, and we had to shut down the state, so they got rid of their camera crews, they got rid of like their nannies, and they just quarantined or stayed home. They didn't have help, and her husband got sick. They He had to quarantine himself in a room, so she alone had all four kids, and I don't think she ever had to do that before,
Probably not.
and was away from all her family because they all had to stay in their homes. Like she was, and they all documented it. Like they had to set up their phones to continue like documenting the show, and she's documenting how like her house is a hot mess. There's forts everywhere. She's sleeping in
Oh,
a
she's
fort.
documenting that she's
Yeah.
actually normal. For our listeners, Marianne is a big Kardashian fan, so this is why
So
she's going over that.
you can have all the money and still go crazy at one point.
And I never wanted, like with money, like I said, like I never wanted to do like, and no offense to anyone who has nannies, because to each his own. Like if you need help, get
I
it.
wish I had the money.
But I always was like, you know what? I wanna be there and be able to be hands-on parent. Like if I'm gonna be a parent, I'm gonna be hands-on and be involved, and I don't want anybody else taking my credit for what I'm doing. So
see,
that
I
was my
feel
thing.
the same way, but I would use my nanny differently. I feel like I'd have my nanny, I guess, more of a housekeeper. So I could spend more time with my kids because I'd spend less time doing
Oh, it's not a
laundry
And
nanny.
that's
It's
just
and
a
a
cleaning.
housekeeper. That's a
housekeeper.
totally
But
different
but
thing.
but 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 I would want a nanny because I'd want to still
Go to
be
sleep.
able to leave the house if I need to leave the house to run errands. I love having like a small business, or like side business and side hustles. So to me, like I feel balanced if I have both,
Yeah.
so a nanny would be perfect because I could do a part-time small business and I could be, I
And
would say a full-time mom, but I'd be able to be a mom once I check out, and I'd be able to balance both. Right now, there's no way we have the funds for that. So it's like, it's either or. And I know people make it work, but based on our priorities and because I want to just be there, maybe I'm a helicopter mom, but I want to be the one to teach my kids how to be self-sufficient and like be the person in their ear, it's important for us for me to be home with them right now. But how nice would that be though to have a nanny and be like, hey, I gotta
yeah.
go to the grocery store,
Yeah, no, for sure.
bye, watch my kids,
See ya.
like I don't need her to be the mom, like I'll still do all the fun stuff. I could be the fun mom, like you could be the one that actually goes outside, plays basketball with them, and then it's like nanny can bathe them. How awesome would that be? Nanny could, yeah. So for you listeners, tell us in our Mamas and Mimosas Facebook group, if money was no object, how many kids would you have? And would you have a nanny? Are you anti-nanny or are you
Pro
pro-nanny?
nanny.
I'm pro-nanny. But like,
And
you
how
still
many
have to be a
kids would you
mom.
have?
Yeah, how many kids would you have with the nanny? What's
Would
gonna
you have
give you the
8 like
nanny?
Roni?
No, I'd still
No,
only have
I'm
4.
never having 8.
I honestly maybe would have 4, but I definitely I would definitely have 3, but maybe I would add one more. I don't know.
My ideal number is 4,
Your
but
ideal number.
sanity wise, right now, no.
Sometimes I'm like at 4, like my number is 4, and then sometimes I'm feeling froggy, and so I leap and I say 6. But that's like,
Whoa.
yeah, that's on a really good day where everybody got up, made their bed, they made their cereal themselves. That's like on a banging day where I'm like, I
You can
can
step
do
back and relax.
I thought you
and
were to
I
say
only
I'm
have
feeling
11.
froggy and I want to go back to 2. There
All
was a question I
right.
wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you guys. Oh, that's what we were just talking about. We were just talking about how that 3-year mark is coming up, right? Or it
For
came
you.
for
Not for
us.
you.
It seemed like every 3 years is when we decided, okay, we're going to have another baby. And so now our youngest just turned 3, and it's just really trippy because
You
I
are what you.
feel like I'm getting that, like, we could have done it again. And I know I'm insane because I know I wouldn't be able to handle it, but it's pretty trippy to know like I'm for real done, like he's snipped and I'm clipped and I'm not clipped, but
That's
he's snipped and like we're like done,
But you can
and
reverse it, can't you?
I wouldn't. You have to pay extra. You have to pay $9,000. It's not so
Oh
the
my gosh,
vasectomy
really?
is covered under your insurance, but if you want to reverse it, you would have to pay $9,000. And
Oh my
depending on
God.
how long he had it, can determine if it's successful reversal
Interesting.
I
procedure.
told you I knew somebody who got their wife pregnant like 3 times with a vasectomy.
Yeah.
Do you feel like a little bit of regret, like since you're going through that baby blues, where you're like, I should have just waited, or you're like, it is what
Um,
it is, or
it's
it's
not
both?
yet baby blues. It's more like, oh, do you remember? It's more like me missing her being
Being
so
small.
small. Yeah. And it's interesting because I've been having a lot of dreams of me giving birth to her all over again, which is weird because like I'll have only 2 boys
Wow.
and then I'm giving birth to her. And I've had 3 dreams just within this month. So I don't know, maybe I'm having my own little meltdown or midlife crisis where I'm like, my baby is not a
And it
baby. Like
was
she's
also
at
her
that
birthday,
age.
right?
And
This
it was
month?
also, she just
Yeah.
turned 3. Yeah. So, I don't know. It's interesting and it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad, but then again, it's also kind of nice because in my dream, I'm realizing like, the baby will want to breastfeed. Hold on.
God,
The
damn,
baby.
your dreams are detailed too,
Dude,
Janelle.
they're
I mean,
so
what the
descriptive.
hell? What kind of person are you?
Like my belly, like I'll be able to see my baby through my stomach, and sometimes I'll like take the baby out of my belly button. It's the weirdest
Are you
freaking
hearing this,
dreams.
Marianne?
Yes, it's like a demon child comes out, and then it's
I was
like
like,
fully
this should
grown.
have been for our October
I
episode.
know. But then I'll keep losing my baby. I don't know what this means. So if anybody's listening and they know what dreams mean, let me just tell you my dream. So the baby will be born and then I'm like, wait, I already had this baby before. And then it's her. And then in my dream, I'm losing her. Like I keep forgetting about her and I'll leave her in like a drawer or I'll leave her like
What?
so on a couch or somewhere and I'll just like continue my life. And then I'm like, wait, I had a baby. Oh my God, I haven't fed her in days. And then I'll go and I'll feed her and I'll breastfeed her that she doesn't want to feed. And it's like so much going back and forth. And I'm like, oh my goodness, thank goodness she's not this little because there's like,
I
I
would
would be
forget
ashamed.
her.
Yeah, as a
Right?
mom,
This
I would forget
this
her.
this dream sounds like she's a gigapet. Remember gigapet back in the day?
Yeah, it's the weirdest dream, man. And it keeps happening over and over. And I don't know what it means, but
Ooh.
it's tripping me out, yo.
Let us know, listeners, if I think we need a dream specialist to come on and tell us some stuff because
I
it's a
can
crazy
never
dream.
remember my dreams.
No, that would be fun. We should do it.
I remember the
Ooh.
fantasies,
Hit
and then
us
you know
up.
there's difference between dream and fantasies. So
Wait, what? There's difference between dreams and fantasies. What do you mean?
yes, a fantasy and a dream is 2 different things.
Like a fantasy is something that you think about when you're awake, right?
You can have fantasies while you sleep too.
No, I thought it was just a really good
No,
dream.
you can
A
have
wet
fantasies.
dream.
A really wet dream. I didn't know you could kind of
Yeah,
link a.
you can. I've had some like sleepy fantasies where I woke up like, "Oh, what did I just have in my mouth?" I'm just kidding.
Ah, a mouthful.
Yes, it's time to go.
All right, bye guys.
Bye.
Like,
Thanks so much for hanging out with us. If you want to catch up on our previous episodes, visit mamasmimosas.com, where you'll get access to all of our podcast show notes, our YouTube videos, and our private Facebook group, where we chat with you about each episode topic and host live Q&As with our fave mom tribe. Can't wait to see you there.